Shalom, everyone, and welcome to Reaching Higher, a podcast designed for Jewish children, where we embark on exciting journeys through interesting and enjoyable subjects. I'm your host, Atara, and together, let's jump in to the wonders that await us. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our newest episode of Reaching Higher. Today, we are going to learn all about how wine and grape juice are made. We are going to bring on my friends, Rivka and Sam, who own a winery. They grow their own grapes and make their own wine. Before we bring them on, we asked some kids, if you were to speak to someone who owns a winery, what questions would you ask them?
My name is Avital, and I want to know why every wine has a different taste.
Hi, I'm Ezra, and I want to know how you make wine. Also, do you make grape juice here?
My name is Alicia. Is it true that people step on grapes to make wine?
My name is Gabriel, and I want to know how long the wine needs to sit in the barrel before it's ready to drink.
Thank you for all of those amazing questions. Now let's bring on Rivka and Sam to get some answers to them. Hi, and welcome to Reaching Higher. Can you introduce yourselves? Tell us where you're from and where you live now.
Okay, so I'm Rivka Baum. I'm from Manchester in England. I made Aliyah when I was 18 years old to Israel. And right now I live in Efrat. And in 6 weeks, we're moving to the Golan.
And I'm Sam Baum, married to Rivka Baum. And I was born in London, grew up there till I was 18, made Aliyah, and also live in Efrat with Rivka and Lavi, our little boy. And we are moving to the Golan in 6 weeks. Amazing. And we are the co-owners of Family Baum Winery.
Amazing. So you said you're moving to the Golan. Does that have to do with this winery? Explain to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I am a grape grower as my profession, and I've been in the industry for the last 4.5, 5 years. And I discovered an area up north, which I believe to be the best microclimate in Israel for growing grapes for wine. So because of our obsession of trying to make the best wine in Israel, we decided to take our entire family, move to where the field is located, and make it happen there.
Wow. So it sounds like you have a lot of experience with grape growing. Can you tell us a little bit about your daily activities, what it's like growing grapes?
Sure. Growing grapes is quite a seasonal business or job. It's mainly from the months of February all the way through to August or September. You start by pruning all the vines. So that's cutting them down to a certain size, and then thinning down the shoots and organizing the rows and spraying against fungicides and pesticides and cutting the hedges, and in the end, harvesting the grapes. That's what happens throughout the 6 months of the growing season. And then every day today is relatively different. The times are usually the same times of work. So from around 5:30, 6 a.m. till around 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Are there certain halachot that apply with owning your own vineyard or particularly in Israel?
So yes, you have a vine is considered a tree. So you have the first 3 years, which are Ola, which you're not allowed to use any of the fruit from the vine. And if any fruit does grow, you have to cut it and put it on the ground. From the 4th year, you can start to use the grapes. And then when you're making the wine, you have to make sure that all the people making the wine are Jewish for the wine to be kosher. And then you have every 7 years, you have Shemitah. And some people do different things. So some people will use the grapes and have a certain kosher certificate, and some people won't use the grapes, or some people use the grapes but not cure the vineyard. There are different ways to go about it. That's every 7 years. And you have to take ma'asot.
So you explained a lot about how the grape growing process and the halachot and everything until then, but what about the process of how the wine is made after those 6 months?
Okay, so what happens is you harvest the grapes when you decide to harvest them, which is often decided on how mature the grapes are, which means how much sugar content the grapes have in them. Either you can harvest them by hand, cutting each bunch of grapes, or you can harvest them by machine. They arrive at the factory, which is called a winery. They are then sometimes separated from the stalk and sometimes not. They're crushed, slightly crushed. They're not pressed, slightly crushed, just to sort of let the liquid, the pulp, come out of the skin. And then all of the pulp and the skins and the seeds are put into one big vat or container, usually of stainless steel, something that doesn't affect the taste of the wine. The must sits in a vat, and then the winemaker often adds yeast. Yeast, like, that's used for making bread or for making beer. So there are hundreds of thousands types of yeast. It's the smallest microorganism that exists. It's a bacteria, and yeast turns the grape juice, which is full of sugar, into alcohol. Takes the sugar content and converts it into alcohol, releasing heat and carbon dioxide. Once that process is finished, you then have wine. You have grape juice that was converted, all its sugars into alcohol, creating wine.
Can you explain to us a little bit of the challenges that you've gone through with running your own winery and growing the grapes and the whole process?
Okay, I think this is where my turn comes in. Sam is fantastic at what he does, so he doesn't often experience huge challenges. I think the biggest challenge that we've had so far would be the war. When the war started on October 7th, we had just done the harvest on Erev Sukkot, and we had started doing the fermentation process. And then on Simchat Torah, Sam was called up to serve in the army. And I was basically left at home with the winery to make the wine. It was definitely one of our biggest challenges so far, because that is not my side of the business at all. I normally film Sam doing it and create content for social media and the sales and the clients. But this year I had to actually try and fill his shoes and make the wine, which was definitely our biggest challenge yet. And Sam has extremely high standards with how he likes things done. So it was a challenge, but we've started to see the fruits of our labor, quite literally.
Of your labor. Our best wine.
Well, how did it come out? How was it?
Fantastic. It's our best wine. It's our third batch. It's our third season making it.
I think you're going to be switching roles soon.
Yeah, or I'll just be fired. Yeah.
So what advice would you give to kids who are interested in learning more about the process of winemaking or starting their own business?
First of all, whatever you're interested in, find an internship, find someone that you know in your community, a family friend who's involved in that business, in that world, and try and dip into it as much as you can. Ask as many questions as you can. The more curious you are, the more you'll learn, and the more you'll learn it like the back of your hand.
And if I could add to that, if you have something specific you like to do in the industry, but that apprenticeship isn't necessarily available, then just get into the industry as an industry. And then you'll see doors will start to open. For instance, I started by, even though I wanted to be in the vineyard, there wasn't any space for me at the beginning. So I started in the group that makes the wine and also packages it and sends it out. And then after a year of working in the factory or in the winery, a job opened up in the vineyard and I was able to move across. So definitely get stuck in, don't be afraid, and just go for it.
I'll add one more thing also, that it doesn't matter how old you are, you can always start or do something new. I'm 28 years old, and this year I changed my profession entirely. I'm still a nurse now for another 6 weeks, but I did 5 years of studying it in a different language and I absolutely loved it. And then suddenly I had, a pull to a different dream, which was the winery. So don't be scared to work really hard for something, achieve it, and then decide you want to do something else. People will tell you you're crazy, and you might be, but that's fine.
I love that. At any stage in life, we could always change what we do. We can definitely at young ages, we could start interesting things. What is one thing you think kids would find surprising about the industry you're in, about winemaking, making the wine?
I think that if you take a bunch of grapes, squish them and leave them in a place that's relatively warm, it will turn into wine. Making wine is relatively easy. There is natural yeast on the grape skins, and obviously there's natural sugar in the grapes. So Literally, if you took grapes, squished them, and left them in a warm place, you would make wine. Making good wine or the best wine in our region, that's a different story. The ability to make wine is not so difficult.
I want to end off. We asked some of our listeners what they would want to ask you before the interview. So Avital asked us, why does every wine have a different taste?
Good question, Avital.
Great question. Because although you could say grapes are grapes are grapes, it's not so accurate. And there's about 3,000 different varieties of grapes. And that's just the grapes that are for making wine. And every grape has a different characteristic. So from the outside, you would say, all of this red wine looks the same in its appearance, but its taste is completely different. And that's because each grape has different characteristics. Just for an example, you have a grape which is called a variety called Grenache, which is originated from the south of France with a very thin skin, and that makes sort of much more earthier wines, which taste a lot more of literally the earth. And then you have thick-skinned grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon, one of the most popular grapes grown in the world, which makes much more heavier, fruitier wines. And that's just one of the differences of two different varieties. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I guess it all comes back to the source of what the grapes were like.
That's right. Every wine is made from a lot of the wines are made from different grapes, and therefore actually the taste will be very different, although the appearance may seem quite similar.
Alicia wanted to know, is it true that people step on grapes to make wine?
It is true. It used to be done in order to pierce the skins of the grapes, because you have to be able to let the pulp, which is the liquid inside the grape, it's the sugar water basically, to come out in order for it to ferment. Now it's done by machine, with a machine that sort of just pierces in order not to crush the seed itself, which can let off some bitter taste. So they just pierce the skin, and then the liquid comes out by itself. It used to be done by stepping on the grapes, because it's sort of a very gentle way of piercing the skins and letting the pulp out without bursting any of the seeds. To stay away from creating any of the bitter taste. There are some wineries who, as an experience for visitors, still do allow people to step on the grapes.
And that is definitely the question that we get asked the most. It's the first thing people say. Oh, do you stand on the grapes?
Well, I've been on Tulin with my kids and my family in Israel, just touring around. And that is always one of the stations is let's make wine, step on the grapes in your sneakers. Let's go. So it was a good question.
Guaranteed there are no feet involved in Family Baum Winery.
I want to end off with Gavriel's question of how long does wine sit in a barrel before we can drink it?
Great question. It really depends on the type of wine. So some wines don't ever see a barrel ever in their entire life. They just stay in a stainless steel vat. Depends on the type of wine. It could be between 6 months to 18 months to sometimes even 24 months.
Rivka and Sam, thank you so much for giving us your time. We really appreciate it, and for teaching us a lot of new things for us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us. And don't forget to follow on Family Baum Winery
on Instagram
and Facebook.
Will do. Sam taught us about the process of making grape juice into wine. And you should know that if wine sits out, it turns into vinegar and becomes sour wine. Come listen to our story about Rav Huna's wine. Welcome to Story Time. Why did Rav Huna's wine turn sour? Once upon a time in a little village, there lived a wise and kind man named Rav Huna. Rav Huna loved his vineyard where he grew the best grapes to make delicious wine. Everyone in the village loved Rav Huna's wine. It was so good that even the birds sang happy songs when they flew over his vineyard. One sunny day, Rav Huna went to his cellar to check out the wine. But, oh no, instead of the sweet smell of wine, there was a sharp, sour scent. Rav Huna's eyes widened as he saw his precious wine had turned into vinegar. 100 barrels of vinegar. Rav Huna scratched his head and sighed. Why did my wine turn sour? Soon Rabbi Yehuda and his friends, who were also wise rabbis, came to visit Rav Huna. They saw the sour wine and they shook their heads in concern. Rav Huna, said Rabbi Yehuda, perhaps you should think about your actions and see if there's something you might have done wrong. Rav Huna was puzzled. Me? Do something wrong? I always try to be good, he said. Rabbi Yehuda smiled kindly and said, well, do you remember your worker, the one who helped you with the vineyard? Rav Huna thought for a moment and said, oh yes, but he always takes more than his fair share of the vines and the grapes, so I stopped giving him his share. Rabbi Yehuda nodded wisely. Ah, that's what we heard. But remember, Rav Huna, it's important to be fair and kind, even when others are not, because two wrongs don't make a right. Rav Huna's eyes widened in realization. Oh dear, you're right. I should have been fair, no matter what. I'll go and give him some of his fair share right away. So Rav Huna went to his worker and apologized. He gave him the vines and promised to always be fair in the future. The worker was surprised and happy, and they shook hands and smiled. Then a funny thing happened. Rav Huna went back to his cellar and noticed something amazing. The vinegar started to change back into wine. From that day on, Rav Huna made sure to be fair and kind to everyone. And guess what? His wine was always the best in the village, and the birds kept singing happy songs over his vineyard. And they all lived happily ever after, with a lot of sweet wine and happy songs. The end. Hey kids, today we're going to make delicious grape juice together. It's super easy and lots of fun. Here is what you need and what you're going to do. The only ingredient you need are grapes. You can get any kind you like, any color you like. What else you'll need is you'll need a strainer, a big bowl, a spoon, and maybe an adult to help you. So the first thing that you're going to do, step one, is you're going to wash all your grapes. Rinse them well under cold water to make sure they're nice and clean. Step number two, you're going to remove the stems because you don't want those inside your grape juice. Number three, you're going to blend the grapes. Now, you can do this with a blender, but I just made this at home, and instead just use your hands or a fork. If you use your hands, make sure they're washed nice and clean. And you're going to mush up all of the grapes. You can do this on a plate or in a bowl. You're then going to pour the grape mixture that you just made through a strainer. Make sure to put a big bowl underneath the strainer so you catch all the grape juice. You're going to pour in the grape mixture and you're going to squeeze it through. You're going to use a spoon to press the mixture to get all of the juice out. And therefore, any of the skin pieces, any of the yucky stuff, anything that you don't want to eat, that part is all going to go in the garbage. That's not going to make it through the holes in the strainer. You are then going to do step number 5, pour everything from the big bowl, pour your fresh grape juice into a glass and make a borei pri hagafen. And that's it. You've made your own yummy, delicious grape juice. Great job, kids. And just like that, we conclude another episode of Reaching Higher. We hope you enjoyed learning about the grape growing and wine making process from Rivka and Sam. Tell your friends about how Rav Huna's wine became sour and how you made your own grape juice. We can't wait to see you on next week's episode of Reaching Higher.